So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. What pride, baby? Yeah!
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions live stream. Now, I just had a little bit of free time today, and I wanted to kind of hop on a live stream, just talk a little bit of Detroit Lions. You know, it's been a while. You know, we've been busy with videos and obviously real life stuff. So I just wanted to sit down today. Right, probably wouldn't have time to do a scripted, edited video on predictions and outlooks and things like that. So today we are just going to sit here. We're going to talk about Lions versus Patriots, and we are going to have a good time with whoever ends up showing up today. So with that being said, okay, I think that I fixed it. All right. I don't know how much was just heard because I swear it was working as soon as I hit live, and then as soon as I switched browsers, it stopped working. So we are officially underway of this live stream, and I guess I'll just repeat how I opened. Today we're just going to take a look at the Week 5 matchup between the Lions and the Patriots. It looks as though everything should be working just fine. The microphone is on, so that is good. So we'll get into it right now. The Lions are a 1-3 football team. They are coming off a, I would say, fairly rough outing versus the Seattle Seahawks. They were in the highest scoring game of the season so far, and they just, despite having the highest scoring offense in the NFL, despite, being a prolific offense through the air and on the ground, despite having the highest scoring team statistically ever through the first month of football. The Lions are 1-3, with the most recent losses, of course, coming by the hands of the Minnesota Vikings by 4 points, and of course the Seattle Seahawks at home by 3 points by a score of 48-45. Now, the Lions are going into this game 1-3. They have a point differential on the season of just -1, meaning they are very much dead even on the season as far as points scored versus points against. And I think the Lions can win this football game, right? Yes, it is the New England Patriots, but New England is not much better than the Detroit Lions. They are also 1-3 up to this point, looking likely at their backup quarterback, with losses to Green Bay, who offensively doesn't really seem to have a whole lot figured out as of this point. Baltimore, who, has, in my opinion, the MVP frontrunner in Lamar Jackson, as well as Pittsburgh, who, they beat, but Pittsburgh is also 1-3 on the season. And of course, the Miami Dolphins, who are a very good football team. Now, as you can see, New England is pretty good defensively, right? They have not allowed very many points. And the only game that they allowed over 28 was to the Baltimore Ravens, easily the most prolific offense they have faced all season. And I would say that they're getting better up to this point, right? They have scored more points pretty much every week. Week 1, they really couldn't score at all. Week 2, they had multiple touchdowns. Week 3, they got to 26. Week 4, they were at 24. And right now, they are hovering right around that 24 to 28 points a game mark that they have been averaging. And that places them right about 24th to 25th in the NFL as far as scoring offenses. Now, Nolan here, as I said, did you see AG talk about how the Chiefs defense was bad, but made a quick turnaround for this season? Yeah. And that was something that I think, like he said, should inspire a little bit of hope to the defense, right? Because I think the defense on paper shouldn't be as bad as it is. And I think with the right personnel changes like they're trying to do, and I think with the right defensive scheme, this defense can be pretty average, right? I don't think they have any superstars up to this point, but I think that the Washington game showed exactly how good this defense can be when all the pieces are clicking, when the pass rush is getting home, when the secondary is starting to pick it up, when, the pieces start to come together. I think that Washington game really showed what the Lions can be when they hit their ceiling. But over the last 2 weeks, the pass rush hasn't really been there. And I'd say it's more pass rush from the middle, right? More interior pass rush that is letting the Lions down than the exterior, right? It's more of the D tackles than the defensive ends. And I think if they can figure that out, whether that be, signing somebody new to be a pass rusher in the interior, whether that be, promoting Demetrius Taylor to be a starter or a role player at some point this week, which I think that they will based on what they've been saying, I think that the defense can get better. I think really the big thing they're missing right now is an interior pass rusher like they expected Pascal to be, like they expected Levi to be, like they expected Kaminsky to be before he got hurt. And, a combination of injuries and underperformances has left the Lions where they are right now. He said, I can see us winning double-digit games, to be honest. I think offense will be another big day. Defense will improve a little bit. And I think that's, a pretty fair assessment to have, right? The Patriots, I don't think they're as good of a football team, right? The Patriots, they're the dynasty of the 2010s. They're, the Brady, they're the undefeatable team, but that's not really them anymore, right? Yes, they went to the playoffs last year, but before that, they were 7-8, I believe 7-9, right? They didn't make the playoffs. They are not off to a good start this season. On paper, I don't think they're a more talented team than the Detroit Lions, certainly not offensively. And I would say that there's not a whole lot of superstar power on the defensive side of the ball for New England. Now, obviously, you have the defensive coaching staff and the defensive mind of Bill Belichick, but I really don't see a reason the Lions should lose this game. I think matchup-wise, they stack up pretty well against this Patriots team, and I think they should win. This is kind of a game where I'm thinking, on the similar level of the Washington Commanders, where, the Lions have the better quarterback. They have the better offense. They have pretty much across the entire offensive side of the ball, they are the better team. And, defensively, yes, New England is much better, but I don't think that the Lions defense is that poorly matched up against the New England offense to the point where New England is going to be putting up 30 points, where they are or should pass that 28-point threshold. And if the Lions can keep their opponent under 28 points, I would feel very confident in that offense being able to put up some points and being able to win. Now, taking a look at the injury report this week, because this is going to be very, very crucial. There is a lot of people here, right? For both sides, their injuries are heavily affecting both sides, but going through, right? And obviously, we don't know who's in or out as of this point, other than maybe a few individuals. But up to this point, right, Lawrence Guy, a defensive end for the Patriots, as well as DeMarcus Mitchell are both out. With a concussion, I would expect Mitchell not to play, and with a shoulder and not playing on Thursday, I think it would be fairly good to suspect that maybe Lawrence Guy won't be playing. So that edge rushing duo or that edge rush for the Patriots may be a little bit depleted. You have Jonnu Smith, who didn't practice on Wednesday but was limited. I would expect him to play. Same thing with Kyle Duggar. Mac Jones, I think, will play just based off, the fact that he's been limited in practice all week. I would expect him to play. Jacoby Myers, Jalen Mills. There are some good players that are injured, but I would expect a majority of them to play. And then going over to Detroit, who has a much larger, unfortunately, injury report, I would say, Chris Board, I would expect to play. I think he's been on the injury report the last couple weeks, but he's still been playing every week. Same thing with Quintez Cephas. I would not expect John Kaminsky to play. Right, John Kaminsky's been out for a little while. I would not expect him to return to this point. I would maybe give him another week or two to recover. Matt Nelson, I'm not entirely sure why they didn't practice. I think it may just be a rest day, but I'm not entirely sure. St. Brown didn't practice on the first 2 days, but I did hear was back at practice today, so that could potentially be something to keep an eye on. He may play. Same thing with DeAndre Swift. He wanted to play last week, and the coaching staff kept him out. And then, going down the list, I would expect Evan Brown to play, DJ Chark, Charles Harris, TJ Hawkinson, Jonah Jackson's finally practicing again. Frank Ragnow, Josh Reynolds had rest days, and that's why they didn't practice before. But, I would expect probably a few players to be out, right? Kaminsky, I would expect to miss, maybe DeAndre Swift, maybe Jonah Jackson. But this team, at least offensively, is starting to get a little bit healthier. And I think if the Lions can return their stars, especially Swift and St. Brown, if Hawkinson can have another big day, if Charles Harris can play at a high level, I do not see a reason that the Lions should not be able to win this football game. And by no means is it a gimme, right? By no means is it a, oh my gosh, easy victory, 30-point, W. But I do think that it's at least a game where the Lions should expect to be the victors. He said Kaminsky being out has definitely hurt us. There were double teaming him and Hutch. Double teaming him and Hutch was able to eat because of it. I think Demetrius Taylor is going to take over at the big defensive end role. I think he will, and based off what I've heard, I believe that is the idea. So hopefully he can be, a little bit of that Kaminsky role, like be that penetrator in the middle, be that guy that they have to double team on the interior so that they can't double Hutchinson on the exterior. Hutchinson really, really performed well when Kaminsky was in because Kaminsky was another player that was creating pressure so that they didn't have to or weren't able to solely focus on Aiden Hutchinson. And I think that, right, obviously you would expect big things out of the number 2 overall pick, regardless of what they do. But double teaming a rookie, I think, first off, speaks to how good Aiden Hutchinson is and how big of a threat he is to, opposing offenses. But I think it also speaks to the fact that they need somebody else to step up in that pass rush because, quite frankly, I don't think the pass rush is getting it done. I don't think Aleem McNeil and Isaiah Buggs are contributing enough in the pass rush to really help the Lions defense. I do not think Michael Brockers, plain and simply, is playing well enough, period, to really help the Detroit Lions pass game or really their defense in general. And I think, like I kind of mentioned in the video yesterday, I really truly believe that if the Lions can, get that interior pass rush, whether it's Demetrius Taylor, whether it's Kaminsky coming back, whether it's, you kick Aiden Hutchinson inside when Romeo comes back, whatever the case may be, however you can get that interior pressure, the Lions need to do that because that was where they were finding success defensively versus Philadelphia, versus the Commanders. And as soon as Kaminsky got hurt, as soon as that interior pass rushing presence got hurt, that's when you saw the defense start to kind of fall apart. St. Brown practiced today, but I don't know if he was limited or not. I believe he was limited in practice, right? Has that ankle injury he suffered in Minnesota. And I don't know if he's going to play. Quite frankly, I don't want to say it doesn't matter because obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown has been maybe the most productive wide receiver next to Cooper Kupp over the last, year or so, right? Dating back to mid-season last year. Amon-Ra St. Brown has been maybe the most productive wide receiver, well, not only in the NFL, but statistically ever at this point, right? If he was able to get a couple more receptions and a touchdown in Minnesota, he would have broken the record for most games in a row with 8 receptions plus as well as a touchdown. So, I mean, he was literally on historic production rates, and unfortunately he got hurt. But last week we saw with Josh Reynolds and with Khalif Raymond and Quintez Cephas that this offense can function without him. And I think bringing back DJ Chark, bringing back, Jonah Jackson is only going to help the offense get better and better. Addison Marinelli says, I wish Hutch would attack more. Hutchinson has been very up and down this year. A big problem is he's just getting double teamed. Like they're just putting 2 offensive players on him at the same time over and over and over again. I think he's, from what I saw after week 3, was the second highest double teamed player in the NFL, only behind Nick Bosa of the San Francisco 49ers. So I get that a lot of people are upset about Hutchinson, right? That he hasn't really produced a whole lot statistically over the last 2 games and really only has 1 game of solid production. But at the same time, he's being double teamed as a rookie. And that's just hard to get around, right? 2 people blocking at the same time is designed to take you out of the play, and they can do that. But ideally, that would open up opportunity for other players to step in and make big plays. And so far, Charles Harris and Aleem McNeil haven't been able to take advantage of those double teams on Aiden Hutchinson. Nolan says, I wish we could put Mike Hughes on the perimeter more. He did that well for KC last season. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I'd be very interested to see, secondary-wise, what their personnel changes may look like. Because, Mike Hughes was a boundary corner last year. He had a good season, but did give up some big touchdowns late in the season, especially against guys like Jamar Chase. And, not that the Patriots have a Jamar Chase type player, but, I think that, a cornerback that gives up touchdowns is not a cornerback that should be playing a whole lot, but he has been pretty good in the slot so far. I'm kind of happy that he's here, but I do think it would be an interesting thing to maybe test him on the boundary, play Chase Lucas in the slot or play Will Harris in the slot, move around some of the secondary pieces to see, who fits where the best, because really the only solidified member of the secondary right now, at least at cornerback, I would say is Jeff Okudah, right? Jeff Okudah is having a phenomenal season, is playing very, very well as a number 1 cornerback on the boundary. Amani, I didn't think played all that badly in week 1, got hurt, came back against Minnesota, didn't look very good last week. Again, looked better than he did against Minnesota, but didn't look like the Amani Oruwariye of 2021. Hopefully Amani can step up and kind of return to that form, return to that, ball hawk playmaker that turns the football over, at least, gives you that chance once a game to get that takeaway, because I think the defense really, really needs it. But I think it's going to be really interesting because, like I said, you have a lot of good secondary members. And at the safety position, I think you could rotate Iffy, or you could put Ifeatu, at the boundary cornerback position where he played last year. I think you could play Kirby Joseph at free safety, or Ifeatu Melifonwu. DeSean Elliott, I would say, is pretty secure at that strong safety spot, but boundary cornerback. Mike Hughes played it at KC a season ago, right? Will Harris practiced all offseason at boundary cornerback, and you have a young rookie in Chase Lucas who played very well in the preseason, who played boundary cornerback for 5 years at Arizona State and did so at a very, very high level versus some of the Pac-12's best wide receivers, right? He was their number 1. He followed, he shadowed, and kind of, became a shutdown corner at Arizona State. So I think that there is a lot that you can do with the Lions secondary right now. But I think the big thing really comes down to pass rush, because at this point, it's just really, really hard to defend if you aren't getting home, right? If your only way of creating and generating, pressure on the quarterback is blitzing 7, 8 guys, that's going to leave your cornerbacks exposed. And blitz zero might work a couple times a week, but you can't run it all game and expect not to get countered at some point, which is what we saw last week by Aaron Glenn in the defense. Amani is still the second on the team in PBUs among our cornerbacks. If he could play the boundary more, and that's the thing I was thinking about, is I know that they moved Ifeatu to safety, and he probably hasn't played boundary cornerback since the end of last season. But when he was playing last season, he played really well, in my opinion, right? I think he had 3 pass defended in 7 games started at that boundary cornerback position. And yes, he did get beat versus Devontae Adams a few times, like every cornerback in the NFL. He did give up a touchdown to DK Metcalf, which, again, it happens. DK is a great wide receiver in the NFL for a reason. But as a rookie stepping into a big-time situation with limited pass rush in a situation where multiple other DBs before you weren't playing as well as you were, I would be very interested to see Ifeatu move back to that boundary cornerback, right? Be that utility tool. Get on the field, because quite simply, I think he's too talented, and I think he played too well last season not to get on the field at some point, somehow, some way. I want to see 26 making plays, because when he was on the field, quite frankly, he was making plays last season. And I think that if you return that Ifeatu and you have that Jeff Okudah, right, that could be a really good boundary cornerback duo who are both still on rookie contracts, both have at least another year under them, and you can develop for the future. So again, that's another option during the secondary process of who's going to be where, what personnel changes they're going to be seen, because the Lions all week have talked about these personnel changes, what they're going to do, how they're going to adjust. And I really, really think that Ifeatu should be one of those adjustments, whether it be at safety or at cornerback. He defended a pass. He did. He had a pass defended versus Devontae Adams. He had a fumble recovery late in that football game that set the Lions up in scoring position. One was very good. I thought he played good coverage when he was on the field, but also he just seemed to take advantage of those opportunities, right? He always seemed to be around the ball to get that takeaway. When the fumble was forced in week 1, he recovered it. When the fumble was forced in week 17, he recovered it. When he was on the field, good things tended to happen more than bad things tended to happen. And as of right now, I can't say that for Amani. I can't say that for Will Harris, even though he is the only player with an interception this season on the Lions defense. I can't say that good things happen when Will Harris is on the field more so than bad things happen. Have you heard about any other personnel changes? That I haven't officially heard anything where it's like, oh, we're going to play this player instead of this player, or, anything along those lines. But if I had to guess, Demetrius Taylor is going to play more. I don't know if that's going to be taking out Michael Brockers. I don't know if that's going to be taking out Aleem McNeil on early downs or obvious passing downs. I don't know if it's going to be taking out Isaiah Buggs. I would assume that Demetrius Taylor plays more. I think that is one of the obvious. He's going to start and he is going to play. I think he should overtake Michael Brockers, to be totally honest. I think he, at least in the preseason, looked far more explosive than anything Michael Brockers has ever brought to Detroit. Another one, I think Chris Board should move into that starting linebacker role, right? I think he should overtake Alex Anzalone, as should, I think, Derek Barnes. Alex Anzalone may be a very good leader, a good vocal player on the Lions defense, but he's not a good football player on the Lions defense, which obviously isn't good for a defense looking to turn a corner and looking to kind of turn their season around. But if we're talking defensive personnel changes, at least personally from what I would want to do, I would want to see Demetrius Taylor start over Michael Brockers. I would want to see either Derek Barnes or Chris Board, maybe Chris Board more so than Derek Barnes, start over Alex Anzalone. I would want to see Ifeatu Melifonwu in some way, whether it be, cornerback, safety, slot, whatever. I would like to see 26 get on the field at some point. And then I want to see more out of Julian Okwara, and I want to see more out of Austin Bryant, because those are 5 sack guys from a season ago that are getting minimal, and I mean very, very bare minimum snaps per game. And I think that needs to change, because Julian Okwara, at the very least, is a defensive weapon that Aaron Glenn should be able to utilize very effectively. Nolan says, I think Bill Belichick has good things to say about Board. Yeah, I believe he was complimenting a couple of players. I believe he was talking about Jack Fox and Chris Board specifically, and Chris Board has been very good this season. I'm not sure exactly what his statistics look like. I haven't really done a deep dive, not PFR. I haven't really gone on a real deep dive to see what Chris Board has done this season statistically, but what I'm telling you is, on the field, like watching him play, he looks very good, right? And you look at his advanced statistics, which is what I'm trying to go to right now. His advanced statistics in 2022, in the 4 games, he has, let's see, he has 10 tackles, which isn't very bad. He's missed 1 tackle on the season, which, again, is a pretty good ratio considering the Lions are not very good at tackling. He's been targeted 3 times and is only allowed at 16 yards in coverage. He has been blitzed 4 times with 2 quarterback hurries as well as 1 quarterback knockdown. He has 3 pressures on 4 rush attempts. He is playing very well, and I think Chris Board should have the ability to play more, because at this point, I think he is our second best linebacker, right? Malcolm Rodriguez, I think, is obviously our best linebacker, but Chris Board is playing like the second best linebacker on the team, and I'm not entirely sure about Barnes, and I might, die on this hill of Derek Barnes being a starter when maybe he's just simply not good at practice. I'm not entirely sure, because, again, he only has 2 tackles on the season, and he's only played 45 defensive snaps through 5 games. So he's playing only about 10 defensive snaps a game. Did see his most production against Seattle. About 33% of the snaps on defense had Derek Barnes involved. But it's really hard to look at a player like Derek Barnes, who last year did make a couple starts, did have some sacks, did have some tackles, did have TFLs, did have quarterback hits, was in a position for some pass defended, and just isn't getting that opportunity anymore. And, again, I'm not in the building. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what is happening behind closed doors, but it seems to me, at the very least, that Chris Board is a player, and so is Derek Barnes, are players and linebackers that the Lions should rely on. They don't miss tackles. They are productive as both rushers and as coverage linebackers, and they're playing well when they're not playing a lot, which makes me think they should play more than the guy who's playing a lot and not playing very well. The boys from Baltimore can tackle and hit. Yeah, and that's another thing, right? We got 2 defensive players from Baltimore, being Chris Board and DeSean Elliott. They are and should be 2 defensive starters for the Detroit Lions. They are probably 2 of our better defensive players right now, which, again, doesn't say a whole lot, because our defense is last in the NFL and it's not particularly close to the second to last place team. But they are playing well, and I think they are, not the flashiest free agents, not the biggest name free agents, but when everybody talks about, Brad Holmes couldn't do this, Brad Holmes hasn't brought in any defensive difference makers, maybe he hasn't paid $15 million a season to Chris Jones or to some elite edge rusher, or, he didn't give $10 million to Randy Gregory or whatever the Broncos gave him, but he has found some talent. Right, free agency, I wouldn't say has been the strength of Brad Holmes over the first 2 years, because, quite frankly, I don't think he had the money or the situation to quite spend all that money. But I do think that in the limited opportunities he's had in free agency, especially on defense, I think he's done pretty good, right? Charles Harris turned out to be one of the best edge rushing signings in the entire NFL last year, right? Chris Board is turning into a pretty good rotational linebacker and somebody who potentially could be starting at some point. DeSean Elliott turned into a starting free safety for the Detroit Lions, who is, in my opinion, a pretty good football player so far. And he didn't have very many signings, but the ones that he has made, they've been impactful. And yes, Michael Brockers was the trade, and that obviously doesn't look very good. And even Mike Hughes, right? He's playing as a starting slot cornerback right now, and I wouldn't say is doing that poorly of a job, but that just hasn't been the superstars that he's brought in, and he hasn't brought in any superstars at this point. But the free agents that he has brought in have been cheap, they've been young, they've been efficient, and I will not be surprised if both Chris Board and DeSean Elliott stick around next season, right? At least if the Lions attempt to re-sign both of those players, because I think that whether they're starters next year or not, they can still be effective players. And if I had to rely on Chris Board as a, first-time linebacker or a starting linebacker for the first time all season, I'd be pretty comfortable. If I had to have DeSean Elliott start games for me next season, I'd feel pretty comfortable about him starting at my safety position. 2023 free agency will be the big hit for Brad Holmes, but that's a long way from now. I think free agency 2023 will be defensive along with the draft. Too early to be talking about the offseason. No, I 100% agree. And I honestly could not tell you who is available. I don't know whose contract is even up next season other than, Amani Oruwariye I know is up. And the Lions free agents I could probably tell you. But as far as what big edge rusher is going to come to the market soon, I have frankly no idea. Or, what, elite cornerback is coming to the market soon. Again, honestly, I have no idea. But I do think that this is going to be the free agency market where Brad Holmes starts to spend some money. I think it's the free agency period where maybe he brings in a star defensive lineman in the interior or brings in a, star linebacker that's a veteran. It didn't make sense before, right? In a rebuild where you come in as the new general manager and it's pretty obvious that your team is not quite ready to compete, you, as the GM, cannot just start handing out massive contracts, right? You can't be handing out 3-year contracts when your rebuild is going to take 3 years before you're competitive. Now, the Lions are competitive. They have the number 1 offense in the NFL. And quite honestly, if Brad Holmes started to get aggressive right here, if he wanted to, give up a 2nd-round pick and maybe, I don't know, whatever the hypothetical is for Quinnen Williams, I think that's something that could potentially be an asset for the Detroit Lions, right? Because not that the Lions can hit on these 2nd-round picks regardless of who's picking for them. If you wanted to give up like that 2nd and a 4th for Quinnen Williams from the Jets, who's seeming to be a little bit unhappy, or if you wanted to, make that season trade for an interior pass rusher or maybe a better linebacker, I do think that maybe potentially, or, a big time safety like Jesse Bates or Roquan Smith, right? I think that the offense is at a point right now that if you can fix the defense quickly, they can be in an opportunity to go to the playoffs. And I wasn't thinking playoffs before the season because honestly, I didn't think this team was ready to compete for playoffs. But through the first month of the season, the offense is very, very ready to compete for the playoffs. I mean, they are the highest scoring offense in NFL history through the first month of the season, which is one of the most insane, incredible stats of the entire season to me, right? The offense is ready to play. The offense is ready to compete for playoffs. And quite honestly, they're ready to compete for a Super Bowl. The defense has a couple of young pieces, but I think that they're still missing some guys. I think they're missing that rangy ball hawking safety that can get you 5 interceptions a season. I think they're missing, quite honestly, that elite pass rusher alongside Aiden Hutchinson, because while I think Charles Harris is fine, I think Romeo Okwara is good. I don't think they're quite elite to that point of like, oh, it's Myles Garrett. He's going to get 4 pressures while being double teamed every single week, right? I think they still need that elite edge rusher. I think they still need that impact player in the middle. I think it still needs that, star safety. And quite honestly, they have all the depth. They need stars. They need 2 to 3 defensive playmakers, 2 to 3 defensive stars. And honestly, if they can add those, I think that they could be in a position to make a playoff run. Now, obviously, right, you're not going to want Brad Holmes to, give up 2 firsts for Jesse Bates or a first for Jesse Bates and a first for Quinnen Williams and give up that 2nd round pick for, whoever else, right? You don't want to sacrifice your future, but if the right deal comes along, right, and the Jets say, oh, we'll give you Quinnen Williams, our, young defensive lineman who is still on his rookie deal, and we'll give him to you for a 2nd round pick and a 5th round pick, or a 2nd round pick and I don't know, Will Harris, or whatever the case may be, right? That 2nd round pick and something else that's not super significant. You think you could be talking about, a potential trade for Quinnen Williams. And I don't, there's not been any rumors about that. That's just something that I've seen a lot of people suggest on social medias and stuff like that. But, Quinnen Williams right now has 2.5 sacks. That would be 2nd on the team from defensive linemen and 2nd on the team in general for the New York Jets. He has 6 QB hits over the past 3 weeks. He has 2 tackles for losses. He is playing a good, very, very good brand of football at this point, and he's only playing about 60 to 65% of snaps anyway. Now, I've also seen, One Pride 40 who's here, what's going on, saying, oh, Daron Payne's a free agent. Potentially Daron Payne is a option who I think would be expensive, but next year you're in that position to spend a little bit of money, be a little bit expensive. Go out and get that nice defensive tackle instead of maybe the cheap rental for a year. I think either one of those options would be good. Jesse Bates, right? If you want to pay a big time safety, Jesse Bates is a pretty good safety to have because he's proven. He is a very good rangy safety. You've seen exactly how to use him from Cincinnati. He can go absolutely dominate on the back end with Tracy Walker and maybe Kirby Joseph. And, if Okudah stays at a high level and if Iffy or, whatever other cornerback develops properly, that could be a really good young secondary. Defense has Hutch, Okudah, Rodrigo. Building blocks are there. They do. They have building blocks. They have, I think, their star cornerback, quite frankly. I think Okudah is maybe not a top 10 cornerback in the NFL, but I think he's a top 10 cornerback this year based off the first month. But I think if you had a defensive line of, let's just say, Romeo Okwara, who had 10 sacks a few seasons ago before tearing his Achilles and was looking very good before he tore his Achilles last season, right? Romeo Okwara, Aleem McNeil, Daron Payne, or Quinnen Williams, and Aiden Hutchinson. I think that's a good defensive line with, of course, Buggs and Bryant and Taylor and Kaminsky and, those guys back him up. And, of course, Josh Pascal and Julian Okwara as well. That's a good defensive line. If you go out and you get Jesse Bates, a secondary consisting of Jeff Okudah, Tracy Walker, Jesse Bates, and Amani Oruwariye, or whatever cornerback you want to draft, again, that's a good secondary. I don't think they're that many pieces away. I think they're 1 or 2 stars away from having a pretty solid defense that can force some turnovers and win some football games. It's definitely about the right deal at the right time for the right price. I agree. We got building blocks, just need some more pieces to cement together. Exactly. A loss to New England may force Brad's hand. 1-4 is a lost season. Force his hand to what, though? Even if they lose this game, nothing is going to change, at least not immediately, right? If we lose to New England because the defense gives up 30 points again, I don't think Aaron Glenn gets fired, but I think you start having that conversation of, okay, kind of like last year, right? You go into the bye, you come out of the bye with a little bit extra game planning, right? And whereas we saw Ben Johnson take over a little bit of that play calling, a little bit of that scheming early in, right after the bye week last year, and the offense started to look a little bit better, right? If they have a bad performance to the defense, does Dan Campbell sit down with Aaron Glenn and say, okay, we're not going to fire you yet. Like, you still have this opportunity, but, can we maybe involve somebody else, right? Can Aubrey Pleasant maybe, have the opportunity? Can Calvin Shepard potentially, have a little bit of that input, right? One of those positional coaches that maybe has some ideas on how to fix the defense, maybe knows how to implement things or knows what, his certain positional group is capable of or would excel at. I think that is another potential scenario if the Lions do lose this game because of the defense yet again. Believe it or not, you have a building block on every level of defense. You do, but you can't build a house out of a single block. You need multiple building blocks on every level to be successful. So yeah, the first level I would say is there, right? The Okudah, the cornerback, Hutchinson, the edge rusher, and Malcolm Rodriguez, the linebacker. I think those are your original foundational pieces, but you still need the rest of your house, right? You can't live off of 3 bricks. You still need to build up the rest of this building. And I think they're off to a good start, but they still do need a little bit more. Broncos, Garrett Bowles, and Ronald Darby out for the season, by the way. We are Lions fans, though, so do we care? I mean, I'm not rooting for players to get hurt. I don't think that affects the Lions very much, but I guess that really stinks for them. Texans went 0-4 and made the playoffs a few years ago. I'm not even talking playoffs. I'm not even, sitting here talking, we're a playoff team right now, because with the farly ranked worst defense in the NFL, realistically, we're not a playoff team. The offense is 100% complete. I think the offense can go do whatever they want to whoever they want, whenever they want on any given Sunday. But until the defense at least shows they can be average, the Lions aren't going anywhere yet. So, I wouldn't even be talking playoffs, even with the best ranked offense in football. Dolphins went on a massive win streak to make the playoffs. I'm not sure when that was. I know last year they won like 8 in a row to end it, but they didn't go to the playoffs. I'm right now with the way that the team is. I think they are still a 7 to 8 win team, like One Pride 40 saying. I've stuck with that the entire time. I've stuck with that pretty much since the draft. I've said this is a 7 to 8 win team that will be competitive, that will be in just about every game, but might not have the experience or the superstar power to come away with some of these close victories like we would all like them to do. But I do think the Lions are set up in a situation where, they could win this week and go to 2-3. Then they could come out of the bye with some health and some momentum and some extra game planning weeks. And I think after the bye, right, of course, you come out against Dallas, Miami, Green Bay. But then you go to Chicago, who, yeah, they're 2-3, but they're not, I wouldn't say they're a good 2-3, right? You play Jacksonville, who's, again, I think a good team. I think Jacksonville's a legit playoff contender this year based off the first month. You go to the Giants, who have won a bunch of these close games, but I would say we can outscore the Giants. We can outscore the Jets. We can outscore the Panthers, right? Not that I'm saying these will be easier games, because admittedly, I think the Jaguars are better than I did in the preseason. I think the Giants are better. I think even the Bears, as much as I didn't think the Bears were going to be pushovers, I do think the Bears are more of a competitive team than I thought they were going to be. Same thing with the Seahawks, right? You can't chalk up wins to this team anymore. But I think going along with saying, oh, Jacksonville's better and the Giants are better and the Jets are better, they're 500 on the season. You look at the Lions and you say, well, the Lions are better, right? The Lions are the number 1 scoring offense in the NFL. They're putting up points like it's the last season to do so, and they're trying to set a record that'll last forever. right? They are a good team, and with a good defense, or at least with an average defense, or even literally a bad defense, but not this bad of a defense, they can win, I think, a lot of football games. So right now, with the way the team is right now, I believe they can win 7 games on the season. I believe they can win 8 games on the season. If the defense goes from allowing 35 points to 28 points, let's give them a one touchdown difference, right? Let's say, okay, allow one less touchdown a game, get one more turnover a game. I think the Lions can be 10, 11 wins. And I think that that is unrealistic as that may sound with an average defense, right? If the defense finishes top 20, I would almost guarantee the Lions would make the playoffs this season. Not that I think it will happen, but I think that shows you realistically how close the Lions could be. If we lose to an AFC team, it is not the end of the season at week 5. I do not have us losing this game, though. I don't know. I think this one's pretty much a coin toss. I think it can go either way, right? Bill Belichick outsmarting the younger, more aggressive head coach, using that aggressiveness against him, or, the young offensive superstar mind of Ben Johnson is going to come in and show Bill Belichick that, we don't live in 2000 anymore and that we live in the future, and goes and puts up 35, 40 points, right? I think that this game could go either way, quite honestly. And I think that this game probably will be competitive for a lot of it, because I think that the Patriots defense is very good. And I would not be surprised if the Lions have their worst statistical offensive day going into Foxborough, right, on the road, where, quite honestly, the road is the only point and the only place where they haven't scored 30 plus, right? They could put up 30 plus in Ford Field like it's nothing. They didn't do that on the road in Minnesota. And quite honestly, I'm a little worried they won't be able to do it quite as efficiently in Foxborough. But I do think they'll still be able to put up points. I think this game is pretty 50-50. We'll have to see what happens. Not expecting us to make the playoffs this year, but I have a number 1 offense is a nice surprise in year 2. Yeah, I think Brad Holmes has done a phenomenal job turning around this offense, right? Because he was patient in the draft. And I think a lot of people wanted the defense to get fixed first. But quite honestly, Brad Holmes took go look at the depth chart last year. Can we find the 2021 depth chart with, Jared Goff, who was not confident, with, I would say an unproven offensive line, with your wide receivers being Quintez Cephas and Khalif Raymond for the whole season, right? I don't know where the Lions ranked a season ago. I'd actually be really, really curious to see offensively where they ranked, because quite honestly, I'm not sure. So they ranked as the 25th offense last season. They had just, let's see, how many touchdowns did they have? They had 23 passing touchdowns all season. Jared Goff has 11, almost half through 4 games. They went from the 25th offense in the NFL. Let's go to scoring offense, because I think that'll give you a better point of grading. The Lions were the 25th scoring offense. They averaged 19.1 points per game last season. 19 points per game. In year 2 of this rebuild, without multiple weapons, without a healthy offensive line for any game, without your number 1 overall offensive draft pick and maybe the most explosive player from 2022 or 2021. You are the number 1 offense, and if we were going off of last year, they would be still the number 1 offense in the NFL through the first month of the season. So I think that really speaks. Yes, I know people are upset that maybe Brad Holmes hasn't fixed the defense, and the defense isn't number 1 overall, but the offense is playing very, very well. And you can't, right? You can be mad at Brad Holmes, right? You can disagree with picks. You can be like, oh, the defense isn't very good. This is a problem that Brad Holmes has had. Brad Holmes has put talent on both sides of the ball. And I think that, the offense unfortunately for some fans, came first, but now it's complete. Now you can put all 7 draft picks into the defense. Now you can spend that money on the defense because you have one side of the ball figured out, quite frankly. I don't think the offense needs a whole lot more other than maybe, a replacement for Jamal Williams if he doesn't resign, or, that's really it. Maybe some more tight end depth or some more offensive lineman depth, but they are done on offense. They can focus all in on defense. And even if the offense takes a step back next year, if the defense takes a step forward, I still think they're a playoff team. Looks like St. Brown will give it a go on Sunday. That is very good news. Minnesota's overrated. Not as good as their record. They beat Andy Dalton Saints on a double doink. Was our game against them. I think that they're good. I think that they're a good football team. I think that they are a productive football team. Do I think they're Super Bowl contenders? No. Do I think that they are the best team in the North right now? I do. If we had an average defense all season, we would be winning the NFC North. That is unfortunately the truth. I don't know if the defense was better. I would be more confident. I agree. I'd be much more confident if the defense was better. One Pride at 40. We should still draft a quarterback, trade Goff, and use the salary cap to fix the defense. Honestly, I wouldn't trade away Jared Goff. I might not re-sign him after 2024, right? I might let him finish out his contract in Detroit, draft a rookie, say day 2, day 3, and let him sit and develop, right? Draft a toolsy guy. Right now, if the draft happened tomorrow, if the season ended today and the draft was open tomorrow, I'm not so sure the Lions would even draft a quarterback. And quite frankly, if the Lions at this point draft a quarterback in the first round or even the first 3 rounds, I would disagree with the pick. I would disagree with the pick. If they go anywhere within the first top 100 picks as a quarterback this year, I think it's the wrong pick. Unless it's a huge steal at some point during the draft, right? If it's like, oh my God, this great quarterback just fell because no one else needed a quarterback, then maybe you take him on day 2. But I would not draft a quarterback unless it's the perfect guy and it's going to work, which is pretty unlikely. Goff is fine if we draft a quarterback. It would be to sit for a couple of seasons or to be a backup. Yeah, exactly. In the offseason, when Goff's value is at its highest, we should probably get a first-round pick. I don't know of a team that would give up a first-round pick for Jared Goff, quite honestly, because Jared Goff does not come with Ben Johnson. And Jared Goff, I think, is a more than capable quarterback in the NFL. I don't think anybody's going to give up a first-round pick for Jared Goff. Quite honestly, I just don't. If you can get a first-round pick for Jared Goff, then I think that maybe, right, if you can get a first-round pick in 2023 for Goff, maybe you would pull the trigger on it, right? If you were like, okay, 3 first-round picks, we can get our rookie quarterback who we love, right, who we're in love with, plus 2 defensive starters, then maybe. But unless you're getting at least a first-round pick, I would not trade Jared Goff away. And what if that cute? Exactly. That's the other thing is like Jared Goff's proven. Jared Goff is fine. And I saw, a tweet the other day that it was like, okay, imagine if the Kansas City Chiefs stuck with Alex Smith because Alex Smith was working. Alex Smith took them to the playoffs. Alex Smith won them playoff games. They would never have Patrick Mahomes. But Alex Smith gave them the time to evaluate properly, gave them the time to see what they had. If Patrick Mahomes did not work out, I think Alex Smith would have still been the quarterback for multiple years. I don't think they were in a situation to force Mahomes to play. And I think that's the situation the Lions want to be in, right? Draft that quarterback potentially, let him sit, but don't get rid of the solid play caller. Don't get rid of the good quarterback you have under center just because you drafted somebody. Make sure that guy is the right guy before you get rid of the guy that your offense can work with. Got to draft the right quarterback. It helps to put a young quarterback in an offensive scheme that with a good – I don't disagree, but it better be the right quarterback. And like I said, I wouldn't get rid of Jared Goff until you know it's the right quarterback. We need a defense before we draft a quarterback. That's another thing, kind of what I was saying, right? I wouldn't draft a quarterback in the first 3 rounds. Quite honestly, I wouldn't. If the Lions are really, really bad, I would draft Will Anderson Jr. If the Lions are, you can go to mock draft simulators. And I know it's really, really early, right? And we're not going to go through a mock draft today because that would just be ridiculous, right? But, defensively, you have good players, right? You have, with your first round pick, Will Anderson Jr. from Alabama. You have, why is it going? I definitely paused the draft. Can you guys see that? Yeah. Right? You have Will Anderson Jr. You have Jalen Carter. You have Myles Murphy. You have, not that I take a linebacker in the top 10, but, potentially Brian Breeze. You have BJ Ojolari. You have, some really good football players you can take inside the top 10 that can help your trenches, that can help your defense. You don't need to take a quarterback early, right? Let's say, Will Anderson or Myles Murphy falls to number 8 or to number 9, wherever the lines are picking. Let's say Jalen Carter falls. Let's, go edge, then lineman, and then linebacker, and then corner, and then safety. And by the time you get to day 4, or not day 4, by the time you get to round 4 or 5, right, you'll be down in the mid hundreds probably. You'll be in a position for a Hendon Hooker. You'll be in a position for and these aren't my rankings personally, but you'll be in a position for DJ Uiagalelei, who personally I really like out of Clemson, who I think is playing very well. You'll be in a position for KJ Jefferson, who again, I really like as a late round quarterback. There's options without going in the first round. I think those options are better than CJ Stroud and Bryce Young at this point. Quite frankly, if you told me I could get 3 defensive starters in DJ Uiagalelei in the 6th round, or Bryce Young and 1 defensive starter, I would take DJ every single day of the week. I don't think it's all on Goff. He's still the same QB he's been. I think it could put a lot of QBs in this offense, and they would play as good. True, but they don't know the system. They don't know the chemistry with these wide receivers. It's not as easy as plugging in anybody and letting them play, because while I agree that it doesn't take some otherworldly quarterback to play where the Lions are playing, I think it does take a smart quarterback. It does take a decisive quarterback, and it does take a fair amount of arm talent, because I don't think you could plug in every quarterback and have them play. I don't think Jimmy G in this offense plays at the same level as Jared Goff. Quite honestly, I don't think Trey Lance does. I don't think Zach Wilson does. I don't think, Justin Fields does at this point. I don't think a lot of the young quarterbacks right now would fall into this system, because yes, it is a, quarterback, I'd say friendly system. You still need to know the playbook. You still need to know the chemistry. And it's not as easy as just plugging in the next guy and going, because Jared Goff, I'd say talent-wise, is a top 20 quarterback in the NFL. And I don't know if you could place in the other 12 quarterbacks below him and have as much offensive success. Don't forget about the $20 million of the cap space you free up. I'm not forgetting, but that's why you draft rookies on the defense, because they are cheap. They are very, very cheap. And then, eventually, yes. Do I think Jared Goff is the 10-year starting quarterback? No. But I think he can be my quarterback through 2024, and I'm going to have very few complaints about it. I do not think we will be in a position to get a Will Anderson without trading. I don't either. I was just, in general saying there's a lot of defensive talent here. Why force yourself to go to a quarterback when there's 2 edge rushers that could potentially go in the top 10? And I mean, as the season goes on, we'll probably find some more edge rushers that'll go incredibly high, like Aiden Hutchinson from last year, like Trayvon Walker from last year, right? It's not all preseason hype. A lot of players show up in their senior, in their true junior seasons, and they make some noise, and they end up going very, very highly in the draft. A lot of good defensive players in the first round: edge, DT, linebacker, safety, corner. Yeah, in right now, if I was talking, and again, way too early for the draft, but if I was ranking needs right now, I would say defensive tackle, specifically a defensive tackle that can rush the passer, edge rusher to pair with Aiden Hutchinson long term, safety, a playmaking safety, a boundary cornerback, a linebacker, and then I would go quarterback. I would address every single position on the defense before I address the quarterback position, because I think that is where the Lions should be right now. I think the Lions need an outside cornerback that can cover more than they need a pass rusher. I don't. I think that the pass rush needs to get there. I think the pass rush needs to get there without having to send 7 to 8 guys. You cannot leave your cornerbacks on islands, and you cannot leave your cornerbacks on 0 blitzes and then still take 3 seconds to get to the quarterback. That's just not a winning formula in the NFL. If you get a pass rusher, and I'll be totally honest, I haven't watched Jalen Carter. I haven't watched Miles Murphy a whole lot. I haven't watched, Brian Breeze or, Gravon Dexter from Florida. Yeah, I haven't seen these guys play, quite honestly. But let's just say, I don't know, but let's say Jalen Carter is the Jordan Davis of this draft, or the Wyatt Davis of this draft, right? Either Georgia player from last year. I would take that before I take a quarterback. I would take that before I take a corner, because I think you've put enough money, and I think you've put enough draft capital into your secondary. You have to try to test some of these guys out, right? You have to try out Efi at those positions. You have to try out, whatever, if Amani plays better, good. If Jerry Jacobs starts playing better, good. If, Ifiatu can move back there and play like he did last year, because I quite honestly didn't think there was a problem with him last year, I would do that too. I think pass rusher, and more specifically interior pass rush, is quite frankly more important right now than anything else on the defense. I wouldn't mind more of a twitchy edge rusher in Murphy next to Hutch. We just have power rushers. We can talk about this Patriots matchup. Yeah, we can. We got a little bit off topic. We're just talking more in general about the defense, but yeah. Remember Ben Johnson tailored the offense to Goff's strengths? Yeah, let's go back. That's a good idea. I don't really know. Let's see. Patriots versus Lions. Let's just go in general. Let's see what there is to do. Preview predictions. And I can't imagine this would be biased at all. So this is, let's see if we can find a better article. But getting back to the Patriots, getting back to the Detroit Lions, I think the Lions should win this game, quite frankly. We'll pause that. I guess we kind of have to go through. But quite frankly, I would say the Lions should win this game. And I'm not incredibly confident on saying, the Lions will win this game. And I'm not going to, I don't feel nearly as confident as when we played the Washington Commanders. But I do think that the Lions should win this game. Right now, it looks like it's about 50-50 split between the analysts, which I'd say is pretty expected, right? Both teams are 1-3. Everybody has this as a relatively close game. I think I only see 2 games that are bigger than 1 score spreads, 3 games that are bigger than 1 score spreads. So, I think that this game will be close. I think when you're talking about matchups, if you're talking quarterback to quarterback, I think the Lions have the better quarterback regardless of who plays. I think if you're talking running back to running back, I'll take Jamal Williams over anybody on the Patriots running back core. And same thing goes for DeAndre Swift. I think if you're talking offensive line to offensive line, I think the Lions are a top 3 offensive line in football. They've already played one of the offensive lines that's better than them, and I don't know if you can make a strong argument that there's a second one. So the Lions have the better offensive line in this matchup. The Lions have better offensive weapons in this matchup. Hutchinson is far better than any Patriots tight end, right? You have, Chark, I think, would be an easy starter. St. Brown, easy starter. Anybody on the Lions offense would start on the Patriots offense. And then looking at the defense, right, and I have the depth chart pulled up, right, you're talking about Taylor Decker versus Dietrich Wise Jr. I think Taylor Decker wins that matchup. You're talking about Frank Ragnow and Jonah Jackson and probably Evan Brown against Devon Godshaw and Lawrence Guy, who, again, is questionable and probably doubtful considering he hasn't played it all this week. I think that the offensive line wins that matchup. You're talking Matt Judon versus Penei Sewell. I think that's probably the best matchup of the day. I think Penei Sewell wins that matchup. I don't think it's crazy to say that he wins that matchup as of right now. And you're talking about linebackers, right? Jawan Bentley, Mac Wilson Jr., Josh Uche. Who's stopping DeAndre Swift if he gets to the second level? If he plays, obviously. But, who? I don't think their linebackers are any better than Seattle's last week, and we saw exactly what happened against Seattle last week. I think our running backs match up better versus their linebackers than our linebackers match up versus their linebackers versus up against our running backs. Right? You talk about the secondary, Jonathan Jones had a very good, I think, breakout debut. I believe he was the one with the pick 6 versus Aaron Rodgers. But if Amon-Ra St. Brown's playing, I don't think there's anybody, kind of like Cooper Kupp, there's just nobody that reliably covers Amon-Ra St. Brown all that well. You're looking at Kyle Duggar and Devin McCourty, very good safety. I actually think the Patriots have one of the better safety rooms in the NFL. But, I guess I don't think that they're going to be making as big of an impact because, quite frankly, they just aren't making a lot of turnover-worthy plays as of this point. And then you're talking cornerback matchups, right? Cornerbacks versus wide receivers. I think DJ Chark can beat Jalen Mills. I think that Amon-Ra St. Brown can beat Jonathan Jones. I think that Josh Reynolds can beat, Miles Bryant or Jack Jones or whoever the case may be. I think our offense, quite frankly, matches up very well versus the Patriots defense. And then going vice versa, right? And I'll read some of the comments. I feel more confident about the Seattle game. Pats will run the ball against us. Hawk matches up well against the Pats. Yeah. We don't beat Matty P. I'll be upset. Pats have allowed running backs to run well. Lions number 1 yards per carry. I think the Lions will run the ball very well. I don't think their offense should have a reason to slow down in this matchup at all. Going into the offensive versus defensive matchups between Patriots offense and Lions defense, right? Damian Harris, I think Damian Harris is a good running back. He hasn't broken 100 yards on the season yet, but I don't think he's better than Miles Sanders. I don't think he's better than Ashawn Gibson, Rashad Penny, Kenneth Walker, or Dalvin Cook, right? I think they're the weakest running back group that we've played so far this season. Right? You talk about wide receivers versus defensive backs. Jeff Okudah is coming off a 4-game stretch where he has locked down Devontae Smith, and then he did it against Terry McLaurin, and then he did it against Justin Jefferson. And yeah, he gave up a few, he gave up a big play to DK Metcalf, but still, I didn't think, I thought it still had his fair share of victories. Now he's playing Devontae Parker. I think that's a matchup that goes in favor of the Lions. Right, you're talking about Amani Oruwariye if he's still, starting at that boundary role. Right, you're going against Thielen, then you're going against Lockett. Now you're going against Nelson Aguilar, who again I think still moved in that favor of Detroit Lions. So I think theoretically the Detroit Lions should not have a problem covering these covering these wide receivers. right? Yeah, I think you still need to watch out for Nelson Aguilar's speed. But other than that, I think you're pretty safe as long as, you have that safety over the top. I don't think that the wide receivers are going to hurt you, right? Hunter Henry, I think, is their best offensive weapon. And I'm not entirely sure how the Lions match up defensively versus tight ends. I guess I'd be curious to see defensive versus tight ends. The Detroit Lions, as of right now, are what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're 7th right now, allowing just 21 receptions to tight ends over and allowing just 260 yards. Hold on. Let's see. It was not sorted very well. Okay, so they are about, dead average. They're not super good, but they've allowed just 260 yards, which, all of their touchdowns came against Noah Fant. And, I don't think that their tight end should be able to hurt us that bad. I think Malcolm Rodriguez or DeSean Elliott should be able to match up and take him away pretty easily. Who's their best receiver? And I put Malcolm Rodriguez on Hunter Henry. Their best receiver realistically is probably Jacoby Myers. But again, you're talking about Jeff Okudah, who's coming off of a great season so far, a great first month versus legit top wide receivers in the NFL. I think he and the rest of our secondary should have good matchups. Henry's not that fast. I feel good about our linebacker being able to do good enough in coverage. I hope so. I really, really, really hope so. But, looking at the pass rush, Trent Brown and Isaiah Wynn, I think, are average tackles. I think Aiden Hutchinson, at least, and Charles Harris, at least, should be able to win their fair share of battles. I don't think it's going to be a domination like, say the Washington Commanders game. But I think if you're telling me that they go 60 pass rush snaps or 60 snaps in general against that offensive line, I think they should win at least 30. I think they should win at least half their matchups, giving them opportunities to get to the edge rushers or getting the opportunity to get to the quarterback, right? You're talking about the interior, which again, I'd say is pretty solid. If they can win, let's say 20 of their 60, if they can win, 33% of their matchups, I think that gives the Lions a good chance to win. I think if Demetrius Taylor can get a little bit of pressure, we can win. If, Aiden Hutchinson has a big game around the edge, I think it gives the Lions a good chance to win. And quite honestly, I think this game will come down to, can the Lions defense get pressure on the quarterback? Because if they can get 3 sacks on the day, if they can get, 10 pressures with, rushing less than 5 people, I think that they win this game. I think if the Lions are able to pull back, kind of take their foot off the gas a little bit, right? Blitz a little bit less, get home with 4 to 5 people instead of 7 to 8, they will win this football game. But if the pass rush struggles again, if they cannot get home, if Trent Brown and Isaiah Wynn shut out our edge rushers, and if Cole Strange is able to take away Demetrius Taylor and the Patriots are able to run, I think that this game very well could go to the New England Patriots. And I think it's really going to come down to the pass rush here. I do not feel good about any of our linebackers in coverage. They should put a safe. I feel good about Malcolm Rodriguez. Malcolm Rodriguez has been pretty good in coverage so far. Rodrigo, not Blankenship, but Malcolm Rodriguez has been pretty good in coverage. He has been targeted 19 times, given up, and this is according to a website. This could not be correct. He's been targeted apparently 19 times, given up 143 yards in 4 games at linebacker. They're not super, good at tracking that, I wouldn't say. But from what I've seen, Malcolm Rodriguez has been taking away tight ends in coverage pretty well. I would put Malcolm Rodriguez on him. I'd let him go play his game, and I would see if you can find a linebacker that can cover in Malcolm Rodriguez. If we don't beat Matty P, I'm going to be pretty upset. I do not disagree. You have a safety cornerback shade the tight end, or slot cornerback shade the tight end. If you need it, I wouldn't even give them that much respect early in the game. But I mean, my philosophy, I guess, has always been, make them earn that respect, right? Where it's like Justin Jefferson, obviously you put a safety over the top, but like I'd say a majority of the game, Jeff Okudah was matched up not necessarily one-on-one on an island, but it wasn't like, there was two people hip to hip with Justin Jefferson, right? There was a safety over the top, but it was Okudah versus Jefferson. And Okudah won without the Lions having to put too much emphasis on Justin Jefferson, right? Or, whether it's, I don't have another great example of it, but like DK Metcalf, right? You didn't see the Lions doubling DK Metcalf because they trusted Jeff Okudah to make those plays. And quite honestly, I don't think that Hunter Henry has played well enough this year to be like, oh, we need to, double cover and we need to do whatever, we can to stop this one player, because I don't think the Patriots have that, superstar offensive player. I don't think they have that Justin Jefferson, that Cooper Kupp, that DK Metcalf, that AJ Brown that we've been playing every single week. I think this is the weakest team we've played all season, quite honestly, offensively, minus the offensive line. And I think the Lions should win this game. Maybe not handedly, maybe not by double digits or by 2 scores. I think they should win this game. And I think that at some point, the Lions just need to be able to win games that they should, and this is a game that they should win. Don't score too fast because Bill wants that. Score as often as you can. Now we need to put pressure on Bailey. I bet you Mac Jones plays. Quite honestly, I would bet Mac Jones, unless he's officially been ruled out, which I haven't seen. I think that Mac Jones plays. He's practiced 3 days in a row. Not having the greatest season so far, coming off 3 interceptions on September 25th. But I think Mac Jones plays. But I don't think that really changes things. Quite honestly, from what I saw last week from the Patriots, I didn't think Bailey Zappe looked that much better than Mac Jones did when he was playing. And I mean, I think it's the same formula, right? You put pressure on the quarterback. I'm not too worried about Mac Jones escaping, nor was I too concerned about Bailey Zappe scrambling for 100 yards like Jalen Hurts or even Carson Wentz to a lesser extent, right? Or Geno Smith, better example. But I do think that if the Lions can put pressure on, I do think if the edge rusher can get home, if the interior can affect that pressure, the Lions will have a great chance to win this game. And I think it's really, truly going to come down to the trench play. This is the worst Pats team I've seen in a while. Yeah, probably me too. See you later, man. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for, talking a little football. It was a lot of fun. Hope your stuff goes well, and we'll see you on the next one. But, and we'll probably wrap this up here pretty soon. I don't think you're going to miss too much, but quite honestly, I think the Lions win this game. I do. I think that the Lions are 2-3. I think that they go into the bye with, kind of that winning record. Not winning record, but right, you're winning adjacent, I guess, is the correct term, right? You go into that off of a win with that momentum, right? You figure it out a little bit this week versus kind of a lesser offense. Then you come out versus Dallas, who I think will just be getting Dak Prescott back by the time the Lions do play them, or like a week into having Dak Prescott back, right? You fix it a little bit this week, not necessarily 100%, but you fix the defense to the point where you win the football game, right? A little less aggressive. You find some personnel changes that work, right? You chip away at this defensive problem for the week, for the time being, right? You take some of the good into the bye week. You take some of the bad from this game because there's going to be some bad. You leave it at the door, right? You leave it before you walk into Allen Park during your bye week. And you go in, right? You take that week and you game plan. You're like, okay, what worked well on defense, right? What, helped us stay in the game? What potentially forced some turnovers? What forced some negative plays on the offensive side of the ball? What worked? And then you come back and you say, well, what didn't work? And you leave that and you adjust it accordingly. And then, of course, you have a whole second week to then game plan and watch the Dallas Cowboys for 2 weeks. Say, what do they do well? What do they not do well? And I think if the Lions show some improvements this week, I think they will come out of the bye week with a significantly better defense, or at least significantly better scheming than what they had going into it. But I think we go to a 3-4 this game. I think it would be very hard to switch up a defensive formation that quickly, right? Because I mean, there's obviously two different levels of play for a reason. I don't think it's as easy as Madden where you're like, okay, well, we'll just switch it over, right? We'll just switch it to a 3-4 instead of a 4-3, or we were on a 4-2-5, right? I don't think it's quite that easy, but we will see. We will see. I don't think adding more linebackers and adding more defensive players, I guess not more defensive players because you'll have 11 anyway, right? But I don't think adding another linebacker is necessarily a bad idea if that linebacker is playing well, right? I don't think getting Chris Board on the field is a bad idea. I don't think getting Derek Barnes on the field is a bad idea for Detroit. If we lose, I pray to God we don't. This is our season over. I mean, I wouldn't say season over, right? Because you still have time after the bye week. And before the season even began, right? In our shows before the season, in our predictions before the season, I have, and I'll even see if I can go find it. But I had the Lions starting, I think, 1-6, maybe? I don't know. We'll scroll through and we'll see. But I had the Lions, and as of right now, actually, pat myself on the back a little bit. I actually have gotten all of my picks 100% correct so far. So here's my early prediction from 4 months ago. I had them losing to the Eagles in week 1. Can't see it. My bad. I had them losing to the Eagles in week 1. I had them beating the Commanders. I had them losing to the Vikings, losing to the Seahawks. I did have them losing to the Patriots, being 1-4. And then I had them coming out of the bye and honestly losing to the Cowboys. And as of right now, if I had to switch, I would switch Miami and Dallas. I had them starting 2-6. But then I had them, finding that rhythm, right? Getting healthy on both sides of the ball. I didn't think the offense would pick up quite so fast, but, maybe the defense starts to pick it up after week 7. And you go in to the Bears and you win. You go to the Giants, or I guess you go to the Giants and you win, right? Take a tough L on Thanksgiving. Maybe you welcome Jacksonville in and win. Welcome Minnesota back for round 2 and win. The Jets, I think, are still a very good team. Go to Carolina and win. Go to Chicago go to Chicago. Is that no? I guess bring Chicago in and win that game, right? And then whatever you go into the season finale 8-8 at the end of the season after a 1-5, 2-6 start. You're off. You finished the season very strongly. I don't think the season's over, quite frankly. I don't think the season truly begins until that Bears game. I think everything up until this Bears game is not preseason because it obviously counts. And obviously, would I love to be 4 and what? Would I love to be 6-3 going into that? Sure. Would I love being 5-4 going into that? Absolutely. But I really think that the season starts at the Bears. I think if we are less than 2 wins going into Chicago and we lose at Chicago, I think that is where you kind of say, okay, the season might be in some trouble. But until that game, I don't think that there is a must-win game for the Lions, because I think this stretch is a very good stretch for the Lions to figure themselves out. I think that this 4-game stretch of New England at New England, Dallas at Dallas, Miami at home, and Green Bay at home is a very good stretch for the Lions to figure out who they are. I think it's a very good opportunity for the Detroit Lions to figure out what they did wrong and, quite honestly, go in to I would say, the second half of their season against, I would say, the easier half of their schedule and start rattling off some wins because, the Eagles are the number 1 seed. The Vikings are 3-1. The Seahawks are 2-2, which admittedly isn't as impressive, but I still think they're not too bad. Right? The Patriots are not quite as good. Cowboys are 3-1. Miami's 3-1. The Packers are 3-1. This is a tough stretch. The Lions are playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 playoff teams in their first 7 games. First 8 games, sorry. They're playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of their 8 first games are against playoff teams. I don't think the Bears are a playoff team. I don't think the Giants are a playoff team, despite them being 3-1. I don't think the Jets are a playoff team. I think the Jags could be. Panthers and Bears I don't think are. So you're going for your, 5 of your first 8 are against playoff teams. 6 of your last 8, I think, are against teams that on paper you are better than. At minimum, right? And of course, there's going to be some upsets here and there. There's going to be, maybe an upset versus Miami. There's going to be maybe an upset loss versus Jacksonville or, whatever the case. But truthfully, I think that this is still how I see the Lions season going up to this point. I would be surprised if J-Mo returns before the Chicago game. Actually, I would say I think J-Mo returns against the Dolphins. Because from what I've heard, it sounds like they're still waiting a week or 2 after the bye is kind of their target range. So I would say if J-Mo's not back by Miami, I would be surprised. But I would almost be surprised if he returns versus the Cowboys. And then, I would hope by the Cowboys, Josh Pascal should be back. Hopefully Kaminsky could be back, which would obviously improve our interior pass rush. The Lions are getting healthy. The Lions have to get healthy. And I think if they can win, if they can go 2-3 into the bye, I think that would be great. Even if they go 1-4 into the bye, they're going to come out so much better and so much healthier than they went in. I still think they'll be a very good team. The Bears had some fluky wins, sure, but they won. The Bears have a better record than the Lions right now. So whether they're fluky or not, they're still winning football games while the Lions aren't. Right? And, do I think the Bears are a great football team? No. Right? They've played the 49ers in quite literally a monsoon in Trey Lance's first game at quarterback. So, yeah, fluky win. They still won. They played, I'd say, the only real good playoff contender so far in realistic weather. And they got kind of, kicked, they got kind of beat up. You play the winless Texans, the only team without a win so far. They win by 3, right? You play the Giants, who I think are slightly overrated as a football team right now. And they lose that game by 8 points. So, yeah, I would say the Bears are not a great franchise with some fluky wins. But at the end of the day, they're still a franchise with more wins than the Detroit Lions right now. So I don't think you can take them lightly either. They're a team that has kept a lot of their games close. And they are a team that, quite frankly, I think may not win against the Lions, but I think at the very least is going to challenge the Detroit Lions, especially if it's really, really poor weather in Chicago. So with all that being said, though, we're going to wrap it up. As far as final thoughts for Lions versus Patriots, I think the Lions are the better football team on paper. I think the Lions have better matchups on both sides of the football. And I think if the Lions can get a pass rush on Mac Jones, they will win the football game. Now, their pass rush has been hit or miss. Obviously, we don't know how good Demetrius Taylor is going to be. I kind of want to see Aiden Hutchinson be kicked inside a little bit with Julian Okwara on the edge. I think that would be very cool to see. But that's just an idea that randomly popped into my head to help the pass rush. I think the Lions can and will win this game.
the Lions are the better offense. The Lions, I think, are the better constructed football team right now. Yes, New England has coaching going for it with the greatest coach of all time, but coaching can only take you so far. I think the Lions are more talented. I think the Lions are going to be a little bit more motivated out of the gate, maybe, because they always seem to come out really strong and swinging. I think if the pass rush gets home, I think they will win the football game. So, with that being said, I think the Lions will win. If I'm taking score predictions, I'm going to say 31 to the Detroit Lions and 27 to the New England Patriots. I think it will be a relatively high-scoring game, nothing like last week versus Seattle, but I think the Patriots will get some shots in. I think that the Lions defense will still show a little bit more to be desired, but will show a few improvements as well. I think the Lions offense, with that number one scoring offense, will come out, will look good, and I think they will win the game on a final drive. But with that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.